Well, we're ready to continue, so it just remains for me now to introduce our principal speaker this evening, Clancy I from the Pacific Group in Los Angeles.
My name is Clancy I. I'm an alcoholic. Sally just gave me a little portable clock. That's pretty good. Last year she gave me a calendar. I'm very glad to be here. Glad to be back in Bristol and see a lot of old friends and some new friends. A bunch of people here in their first year. And I've had kind of last year I was here and I was sick. I'd go to a meeting, I'd go upstairs and throw up. That really got tiresome after a while. Tiresome for the people around me too, I guess. But this year wasn't so bad. I wasn't sick, but on two different legs. When I went from Los Angeles to Virginia last Friday, the airlines lost my bags. I got them back just in time to go to London, and they lost them again. And I didn't know if I'd ever get them back. They were in Chicago, for God's sakes. And finally got them back just in time to come to Dublin to see some old friends in Belfast last night. And I'm glad I got them. And if anybody wants to buy some dirty underwear, I got it for you. But this is not the world's worst trip, but I may have mentioned this before here, but a couple of years ago I really had a bad trip. I was speaking in Reykjavik, Iceland, which is way beyond any lengths anywhere to go anywhere. And on the way back, I had a long delay in Minneapolis, 4 hours sitting in the Minneapolis late at Sunday night, and I was tired, and it was a long trip, and I had to go to work Monday morning, and it was cold out, and hardly anybody around. I sat in the red carpet room, which is the United Airlines frequent flyer room, and after a couple hours, I had to go to the bathroom, so I went to the bathroom. They have a very attractive little men's room there, two little stalls side by side with little doors, and you go in there, I was sitting there meditating, thinking about things. And all of a sudden, a voice came out of the other one and said, "Hi there." I didn't say anything. Pretty soon the voice said, "What are you doing tonight?" I thought I better put a kibosh on this right away, you know. And I'm going back to Los Angeles to see my wife and my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren. But thank you very much for asking. I appreciate it. There was a long pause. The voice said, "We could really have some fun tonight if you wanted to." And I was tired and cross. I overreacted, I guess. I said, "Look, why didn't you do what you came in here to do? I don't know what it was, but I'm in here to do something else. So why don't you just forget it?" There was a long pause. The voice said, "I'll have to call you back. This asshole, the next stall, won't shut up." That's what we call a bad trip. I know we have a lot of new people here and a lot of different people, and I'll tell you one thing I want to tell you. It kind of hurts my feelings. Whenever they pass the basket before the speaker, you know that they've got no confidence in him at all. Get the money now before the son of a bitch talks. You'll be sorry someday, Sally. But interesting, because they couldn't be more diverse, you know. A renegade German running amok through the streets of Venice, and a sweet girl raising her children in Jersey, and yet combined in a way that's pretty hard to understand, and yet they are combined. You know, if you're new tonight, you may not know this, but there seems to be types of alcoholics. We don't talk about it much in AA, but there are types of alcoholics. Bill refers to them a little bit in the book. There seems to be a type of alcoholic that any way you measure they're an alcoholic, they drink, they can't stop, all these things. And something happens that really threatens their security. Maybe a loss of a job or loss of a family or death in the family, and they quit. And they never drink again. And there are quite a number of people who have been able to do that. There's also the same type of alcoholic. If they are addicted to become physically addicted to alcohol, they require more. Now, some people don't even understand there's such a thing as physical addiction to alcohol, but it's more lethal than drug addiction. When you withdraw people from drug addiction, they get very sick. When you withdraw people from alcohol addiction, many times they die. They go to convulsions and delirium tremens and things like this. And these are the people for whom treatment centers were originally created, so they could be medically withdrawn and point out the error of their procedures as they go along. And finally, when they get done, come out of the treatment center, they have tears of sincerity rolling down their cheeks, and they quit. And they never drink again. In fact, there's a very famous hospital up in Seattle called Schick Shadel that advertises, we will cure your alcoholism in 30 days. And they do. They have long lists of people who they've done it for, of that type of alcoholic. Then there's another type of alcoholic who seems to be an alcoholic by any way you measure them. And they drink and get in trouble, they can't stop drinking. And something happens to really threaten their security. They may have a losing family or a job, or somebody dies in their family, and they quit. But they always eventually begin to drink again. And these same type of people come out of treatment centers with tears of sincerity rolling down their cheeks. I quit! But they always eventually drink again. And these are the type of people that have baffled everyone who's tried to help them for recorded history, 4,000 years of written history of people like this. And everyone has tried to help. At one time they thought they were possessed by devils and were put to death and flogged and put in prison. And Britain sent many of them overseas to the colonies to get them out of here. And because there's just no way to deal with these people. And more currently, psychiatry has put their heads to work on dealing with them. Medicine has tried various medications, various understandings. Psychologists have worked with them. Religion has prayed over them and tried to help them, to no avail. Never been any avail. Even in my lifetime, there was no place for an alcoholic to go, ever. You just did the best you could. As our young lady said tonight, you're going to have to drink, just have to try to control it. Just have to try to control it so I don't get in all this trouble. And these are the type of people that fill rooms like this. Bill Wilson, when he wrote our book, he referred to them as, he didn't know how to define them exactly, but he called them alcoholics of our type, as opposed to any other type. Alcoholics of our type are people who can be reasonably expected to drink again, unless something dramatic happens. And most of us know that story about this guy, this wealthy family in New York that had a son. They sent him off to see Dr. Jung in Switzerland, and he worked with him for a year, and he said, I think you've worked your way through the conflicts, your nervous conditions that always seems to make you drink. And he sent him home, and he stopped in Paris for some friends of the family, and he got drunk again, and it's terrible. They sent him back to the doctor. The doctor refused to take him back. And they couldn't understand, why are you being so vindictive towards Roland, not taking him back? He said, well, he said, I realize now I have misdiagnosed his case, he said, in effect. I thought he had deep psychological problems that I could deal with, but I see now that he is what is known as an alcoholic. And to the best of my knowledge, there is no effective treatment in the world for him today at any price. This was 1931, not all that long ago, I'll tell you, after all these years. And of course, Roland didn't like to hear that. He says, what does this mean, doctor? And the doctor said, in effect, it means that you will have to keep yourself confined voluntarily or involuntarily as long as you live. Otherwise, you almost certainly will drink intermittently to excess until you die or go mad. And Roland didn't want to hear that. I wouldn't want to. And he said, is there any way out at all? The doctor said, well, he said, in effect, I can't quote him directly, of course, but he said, in studying the literature, there have been a few cases, I've never seen one, but there have been a few cases where there's been an involuntary psychological change, which they call some sort of a spiritual experience. And that's about the only way I know to stop that, but there's no way to get it. They're very, very rare. I suggest that you keep yourself confined. And he came home, as we all know, and was among the first link in a chain, which I'm sure we'll hear about this weekend in the history of AA. But this thing has always been this way. And most of us, where most of us see it, we don't see it psychologically, we don't see it physically, we don't see it dramatically, but most of us have seen it in the face of people who love us. When you see that look and they say, oh, how could you? Look at you. You promised. You promised. And now you're drunk again. How could you do this after all that's happened? And I don't know why. So I say things like, shut up and leave me alone. Get off my back. Which makes them cry and go away. And I feel bad too, but I don't know what to tell them. Because it's a strange phenomenon. Why would anybody drink when they know they can't drink? And that has been the puzzlement of all kinds. And then in case you're new, that's why Alcoholics Anonymous is such a remarkable thing. It's the only place in history on a continuing basis where people like us have been able to stay sober up until today. There's all sorts of programs who are supposed to do it, but nothing ever does. I remember when I first got sober, I was working finally got, after a couple of years, got a little job in a medical corporation. I was writing stuff, and I'd read medical magazines, and I saw the first advertisement in a medical magazine that I ever heard of that applied to alcoholism. And it said, doctors, at last you can cure your alcoholic patients. No side effects. This will help them break the habit. And it even had a lovely name. It was called Librium. I thought, that means freedom. I thought, just my luck. I've been fighting booze all these years, and just when I had to get sober, they had an answer. God damn it. And I didn't have any Librium, but a couple years later, I saw the first Librium survivors come back. I'd like to get my token if you point me to the podium. A few years later, I was working in Hollywood in television. And one day I looked at our playlist for that day, and they had a guy from Chick Shadell, who was, at that time, Chick Shadell announced they could help people return to social drinking. And I thought, well, I don't want to return to social drinking, but I'd like to hear about it. So as they were doing the program, I went down and stood behind the camera and watched. And they're nice guys. He was the director of their program, new director of their program. He was a known alcoholic, but they had discovered that an imbalance of the enzymes caused this compulsive drinking. And if they could redress this imbalance, people should drink. I thought, yeah. But at the end of the program, he lifted a martini. He said, alcoholics say this can't be done. But watch. And I didn't even want the martini, but my tongue went. Jesus, that's a breakthrough. And it was really pretty impressive. But about a month later, apparently, I understood that one day his enzymes didn't kick in right in the nick of time. And he was in a padded cell at Chick Shadell. So after that, they announced they believed abstinence probably was a better answer. One of the great cases, these just go on and on. I'm not going to go on and on with them, but they do. I was working in a big advertising agency downtown Los Angeles. I was reading the paper one day. And there was a page-and-a-half article on how a religious hospital had stopped people from drinking, cured them from alcoholism. I thought, well, I got to study this one. And it turned out the Seventh-day Adventists in their hospital in Redlands, California, they don't believe in drinking, but they know that drinking exists and they want to help people. So they took one of their wards and set it up as a bar, a regular bar with a back bar and a bartender. And they'd bring these poor boobs in there who are the first, what? What? What, Sally? I know the podium, thank you. I know the rostrum, but thank you. She didn't think I could find the meeting tonight. I'm going to send somebody with me. Go to Al-Anon. That means I'll have something in my lethal in my bed tonight. Bite this one. But anyway, I don't mean to appear to be mean to Sally, because I really love her, but she is very over-solicitous to my welfare. And I like the feeling of adventure and backing up. Yeah. But anyway, they had this bar set up. These poor boobs would come in there. Some of them fell off the podium. And there'd be a bar, they'd be sick and desperate. What kind of thing, how are they going to treat me? And the bartender says, you want a drink, pal? Yeah, I do, but what is that stuff? What do you got in that stuff that makes you vomit? No, I guarantee it's really alcohol. There's whiskey, there's no ending, no additive to any bottle here. Really? Are you lying to me? No, I swear it. So they pour me a drink. You give him a drink, he'd be a little wondering, you know. Oh, that tastes all right. God, thank you. And they had a little cord on the glass, so I guess they couldn't steal it and take it back to their room, you know. And they'd, you religious people know how to handle alcoholics, I'll tell you that. And you come in there every day and have a few drinks, and finally after a few days, you'd have a drink. And as he drank it, they'd shoot an electric charge through that cord. Hold the ice next time, Fred. Then they'd give him a drink without a shot. That's more like it. Happy days. And Jesus, the poor guy, he'd come in there and he'd, you want a drink? Yeah, I guess so. And pretty soon he'd come in one morning and said, you want a drink? No, I don't believe so. And if he did that 3 straight days, he was cured. And they released him. And they said they did follow-up, and everybody was fine. They didn't do any follow-up, obviously, because they found out later that most of the people that were released never got beyond the first bar where there was no wire on the glasses. It was a temporary cure. There's another place, a doctor in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I have a daughter living, and he had a plan to solve alcoholism. He would, when you were really drunk, your family would take you there, really drunk. And he'd take movies of you. Then the next time you felt like drinking, you'd go by his office, he'd play the movie, he'd say, oh man, I don't want to be like that. I never realized it was like that. And that worked very good, except after a while, people didn't feel like going to the show, you know. I saw the movie, I think I'll go to the bar straight ahead, you know. One of the great of all time was the Rand Corporation. This is the last one. In Santa Monica, in 1972 or so, it made headlines all over the world. Most of you weren't sober or weren't looking for them, but I saw them. It said, alcoholics can drink again. Of course, in small type, except those that can't. They implied that alcoholics could drink again, and they had a technique of tapering on, so you did it without any. And that got a lot of ink and made all the papers. And they said they did follow up, and people were drinking successfully, and they were tired of people saying that they weren't doing it. And it wasn't until about 4 years later, some doctor in North Carolina got a hold of the list and called them, and they were all drunk. And I knew a guy in the Rand Corporation said, how in the world did you do your follow-up? You said there was, he said, we did do it. We would call them and ask them how they were doing. And that just made me laugh. I could have passed that test any day, you know. This is the Rand Corporation, how you doing? Still okay. There just doesn't ever seem to be an answer, and yet people do not want to accept the fact that there are rooms like this that work, because it seems to go against the judgment of science and medicine. I am in a situation that most of you aren't in, or probably none of you are. When I go to work in the morning, I leave my home out by the ocean, I drive downtown, and I step over the bodies of dying men and women and children from alcoholism and drug addiction. And I spend all day trying to find ways to help these people. When I go home at night and I step over the bodies, some of them are dead, been dead since morning, and taken away. And you might think, gee, we're not a treatment center. We're way below that. We're down to trying to keep people alive for another day if we can. And you might think, well, gee, why don't you help these people? You're at AA, why don't you try to help these people? And I can't tell you how many times I've tried to help those people. And it took me a long time to realize if sobriety could be conveyed by good intentions and by people who had good intentions, why did I slip year after 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 year? The worst years of my life came after good people were trying to help me. And I was going to AA from time to time. And I knew all about AA, and I knew about the steps, I knew about the traditions, I knew about the book, I read the book. My sponsor, I got a sponsor, he said, read this book. I read that book, and I'm a writer by life, and I'll tell you what I found in that book. It had to be one of the dullest books I ever read. So I didn't pay much attention to it. Some years later, when I came off Skid Row, my new sponsor had me read that book again. And I read it again. And it was even duller than I remembered. You know, they say it's a badly written book. It isn't a badly written book, it's just a dull book. It never gets anywhere. I wrote advertising for big corporations where you do this, buy this product, take this action, blah, 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 blah. I'd like to find a little of that in the book, but there's nothing, you know. If you are thorough at this stage of your development, I just had to give up on it. What in the world here would keep anybody sober? Especially if you're not really an alcoholic. That makes it even worse. And I suppose that's why, now in the United States, where there's more sobriety than any place in the history of the world, and they have, there's always, Southern California, where I live, I believe there are more sober alcoholics south of Santa Barbara than there are in New York and Illinois combined. It's really the hotbed, the heartbeat of Los Angeles, of AA. Some people think Akron, Ohio is the heartbeat of AA. Akron has the same relationship to AA that Bethlehem has to Christianity. Something nice happened there once, but not for a long time. But there's active in AA, and there's a lot of action. And in America, where there isn't a town with a stoplight that doesn't have an AA meeting at least once a week, it seems like, and most towns have big of them. My home group was an enormous group, the largest group in the world. Wednesday night, there's 1,000 people sitting in there, all very excited. Some of you have been there. We tried to help visiting Germans, the little puke. I don't need that anymore. I found love. Bless you. See, I don't judge people. I just report on them. But so there's no need for people. Dr. Jung was wrong. You don't have to go through any spiritual experience to stay sober. These people haven't had spiritual experience, apparently. And yet people are staying sober all over. And yet, in spite of all of this, it is estimated, as far as I can gather from the National Institute of Health, the figures I see, that something over 90% of alcoholics of our type in America still die drunk, or it's a direct result of drinking. And you say, why would this be? When there's an answer available, why would people go? Most people would just think you'd go to AA and find an answer. It's free, it's everywhere. Many people go, not very many stay. That quotation that 50% of the people who go to AA never drink again, that is not true. I think perhaps the statement was 50% of the people who go to AA and make an attempt to practice its principles to not drink again. But the people going out, all you have to do is look through an old phone directory from your personal phone directory from 10 years ago and see how many names are still there. I'll tell you, that's a frightening thing. Now, why would that be when AA is available? And as far as I can tell, it gets down to one of the more really tiny, apparently tiny little things in life. It almost killed me. It kills people around me. And unless it can be overcome, it'll kill people like us on a continuing basis. It's not some big dramatic thought process. It's that sure knowledge in my stomach, and I believe every one of us have it there. But my case is different. Just that small thing. Because I know you mean well, I know you want to help me, and I know this thing works, it works for a lot of people, but not for people like me. And you wonder why that would be. I remember when I was sent to my first AA meeting, a long time ago, 1949, and I was 22 years old, and I went to a room with 8 fat old guys sitting around a table. They said, what are you doing here, kid? I said, somebody thought it might be a good idea. I could come here and start helping cut down on my drinking a little bit. And I didn't realize that they were shocked because I was 22, about 20 years younger than anybody else in that state at that time. It was like someone coming into AA now 12 years old and saying, got a terrible problem. Go home. You know. He said, do you think you're an alcoholic? I said, I don't really think so. He said, what do you think's wrong with you? I tried to be honest. I said, I think I'm too sensitive. Listen to this one, Earl. He's too sensitive. Well, I never said that again for a long time, I'll tell you that. I may say it tonight, I may not if I feel confident. But it didn't take me long to discover what AA is. We have these new people, a lot of new people in their first year tonight. I'm sure there are people back here from SLIP where they've been slipping and slipping, some of them. And it doesn't take you long to discover what AA is about, or alcoholism. What is alcoholism? Easy. Alcoholics are people whose problem is alcohol, and they drink, and something they can't stop. They eventually get driven to AA, where they must admit that their problem is alcohol, and as a result of that, their lives have become unmanageable, and then they must return to God, and God's grace will keep them sober. Now, pretty much it, isn't it? And I heard this, and it was interesting, but it had nothing to do with me. Because my problem isn't alcohol. And if it were, I could not rely on God's grace to help me at all, because I'm not a very nice person. There are people in AA I've heard who say things like, I've been searching for God for 30 years, and I found him in AA. I never searched for God 10 seconds. I know where he is. He slowly circles the Our Savior's Lutheran Church in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And he gives it to sinners, and he gives it to Catholics. And I had become one and married the other. And you could say all you want about childhood beliefs, but I was raised in a strict church, in a strict belief, and it always seemed, my only problem was I seemed to need more fun than other Lutherans, but I believed in it strongly. And when I began acting badly and drinking and raising hell, it made me feel guilty a lot. And so sometimes that makes you drink more. I look back, I remember going to AA and having them say, if your problem is alcohol, my problem isn't alcohol. I wish it were. I wish it were. But I had problems long before I drank. Even as a boy, I remember feeling there's something missing in me. I don't know what it is. But when I get I'm pretty good with people at a distance, but when I get close to people, they don't seem to like me so well anymore. They seem to realize there's something wrong with me. I don't know what I wish they'd tell me what it was. I'd change it. And I don't seem to fit in well. And the people I want to be with, they don't seem to want to be with me. The people, when I'm around people I want to impress, I feel clumsy and awkward. I hate myself for that. And I don't have can't just make small talk and do things normally. And I thought, when I grow up, it'll be different. And I grew up. It was almost as though, if you're supposed to go through life feeling like this, he said, most of the time, I always felt like this for some reason. It's not quite right. Jesus. Occasional moments of elation were great, but, pretty soon it always goes back to that. I thought, once I get out of this town, once I go somewhere, once I become something, once I get over my feelings of inadequacy, once I get over my feelings of not fitting in, I'll be something. And I grew up and I became somewhat successful. And I had these feelings, different forms of them, but still the scale there like that. And I had some money. I spent a lot of money. I was making pretty good money. I was able to afford thousands of dollars in psychoanalysis. And I really loved psychoanalysis. I didn't know why for years later, but I found out why. But I love psychoanalysis because they showed me ways I'd been hurt I didn't even know. I could see that I'd been a victim for a long time. I was repressed by the Norwegian Lutheran Church. I didn't know that. How would you like to find that out how much your own church has repressed you? I remember explaining that to a cop while he was arresting me one night. He didn't. I discovered that I'd been scarred by the Depression. I didn't even know there'd been a Depression. But once they explained it, I could see it clearly. A lot of things. I'd come out there and sometimes just stop and have a drink and think, it's amazing I'm doing as well as I am. And I read books, because I'm a reader. And I got together sometimes with other groups of misfits, and we sit in back porches and discuss things we didn't understand. But the thing that saved my bacon was when I was a kid, nervous, irritable, restless kid, what saved my life was World War II. You'd had it going on over here for a couple of years already, but we got there, and I started going to movies to see about John Wayne and people killing Japs, and I thought, that's what I should do. And one day I thought, that's what I need. And I was about this tall, had a face full of pimples, and was dumb, had never been away from home even. But I read a lot, so I thought I knew a lot. So I got my mother to I told her I wanted to go to the northern part of the state and visit my aunt. She packed my little bag and gave me some money for a bus fare. And I took that. I got a guy to give me a ride to Minneapolis, 100 miles away. And I decided to hitchhike to San Francisco, 1,800 miles away. And I never hitchhiked. I didn't know anything about it. I looked at the map in the school library. It didn't seem very far. I stood outside of Minneapolis, and the car stopped. She said, where are you going, kid? I said, San Francisco. So am I. Hop in. And away we went. Turned out he was in the Navy going back to a ship. I don't know why he ever stopped to pick me up. I wish I could find that guy. He must be a saint. But he put up with my babble all the way across country for 3 days. We'd stop at that. There were no motels. He'd get me a room or a little bed in a trailer park or something. Bought my meals. I didn't think a thing about it. I never hitchhiked. I thought that's the way it was. Tell people where we're going to go, they get you there. I told him I wanted to be in the Marine Corps, and he said, you're not big enough for the Marine Corps. He gave me a long lecture on that. I said, maybe you can get in the Merchant Marine because they're crying for sailors. All the good guys have gone to the Navy. I'll drop you off to the Coast Guard office where they apply it. Don't tell them you're 15, tell them you're 16. And he said, good luck, kid. And drove off. And I went in there, I said, how to be in the Merchant Marine? Here's an application. Filled it out. Said, you're only 16, kid. You'll have to have your parents' permission. So I took it around the block, got my parents' permission. And they were desperate. They were taking it anyway. They gave me seaman's papers right there. No training, no nothing. Had another guy and I get on the National Maritime Union, signed some papers for dues, whatever the hell those were. Took us to Embarcadero, put us on a big ship. That afternoon, we were on a load of torpedo warheads going to the South Pacific. And it really was fun for about an hour. But I eventually became the ship fool, you know. I was dumb. Hey, kid, get out of the engine room. Tell me we need a left-handed wrench. Hey, kid, go up on the bridge. Tell the captain we got to get some elbow grease. And these guys would sit around every day and drink whiskey. They weren't supposed to on these ships, but who's going to stop? These guys would have been pirates any other time. Couldn't get in the Navy. They'd talk about their sexual exploits, and that bothered me because I was still a Lutheran at heart. And I'd had sex in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, but I'd been apprehensive, I'd been afraid, and I'd been alone. These guys were doing it with people. But they sat around and drank every day, and I was just appalled by that. Now, as far as I know, I'd never been in the same room with a bottle of whiskey at the age of 15. And one day a guy offered me a drink. He said, well, hey, kid, you think you're man enough and I'll snort? And I drew the line there because I had some decency left. And I was just prepared to just wipe him out. I was going to say, you get that bottle out of my face. I happen to be a Norwegian Lutheran. You probably don't know that. You probably are a Catholic or something. I don't know. But don't put, I promised my mother and grandmother I'd never drink, and I never will drink. Don't ever put that whiskey in my face again. I was just going to tell him that. I knew that'd just wipe him out. And just as I was about to say it, he said, well, you think you're man enough? And I heard a voice say, goddamn right. So I had my first drink out of the first bottle. I was close to it, burned my mouth, my throat, my stomach, my throat, my mouth, and his shirt finally. Get the bottle right though. So all the way across the Central Pacific when no one was looking, I'd sink into those sea bags once a day at least to take a drink of whiskey. And I hated it. And I'd throw it up and I have to wipe it up. But I thought if I could hold some whiskey down, they'd think I was a man. I realized now it's ridiculous. Nothing what I could have done made them think I was a man, because I wasn't a man. But we were coming into Pearl Harbor the day before my 16th birthday, and all the, you could still look out and see them digging up ships, and I was down there taking a drink of that crap, but it stayed down. And that day, for the first time, I felt what alcohol does. It makes you feel a lot better. I wouldn't have known this at the time. I wouldn't have the objectivity to see it. But looking back, I suppose what alcohol did two things for me, and one, maybe they're the same thing. One, it was the first time I ever felt the way men looked. And secondly, it made the scale disappear. And for a little while, it was just wonderful. And I discovered why people drank. I didn't become a terrible alcoholic. The next day, they took me into Honolulu, got me 2 or 3 bottles of beer, and I drank those and got drunk, and they thought it was fun, and I became a terrible alcoholic at all. I just added something I knew in my life. When you feel bad, you can have some drinks. And later on, some more trips, and got in the Navy finally, and it was the end of the war. I was in a naval hospital up in San Francisco being sewed together, and they passed around some tests. I've always been good on tests because I read a lot. So they gave me a high school diploma. I'm still not only a junior in high school. I went back to Wisconsin after the war and went to university and won some trophies for the university. And I met this lovely girl who turned out to be a Catholic, but she'd already won my heart. I couldn't stop it. And we got married, and I went out in the world, and I became a sports writer, which is my favorite job I've ever had. But then my wife began manifesting the terrible behavioral patterns of Catholics. And if you're a Protestant, you better find out if you marry a Catholic. You are about to have a big family, baby. And I started my next career as a national distributor of small Catholics. And all these years, I drank and raised hell, had fun. Great. If you're new, I want to tell you something that may startle you. Alcohol is the best friend I ever had. Yeah, it sounds odd, but friends come and go. Lovers come and go. Cities come and go. Jobs come and go. But when a few drinks is just make the scale dissipates and you feel like you're something, boy. That's great. And the only problem I ever had with it was the same problem these two folks had with it. I have a tendency to drink too much. Or as my psychiatrist pointed out, I have many times been thoughtlessly overserved. And then I sometimes act bizarrely. And that's why some people thought I should go to AA, because I'm a nice guy, but sometimes when I drink, I act bizarrely. And I went to AA, and It's nice, but my problem was not that. My problem were feelings and emotions. And these old fools can't quit. I can quit. They can do anything. If your problem is alcohol, it isn't. And then what happened was I finally as I get more kids, I had to get better jobs, so I had to get in advertising and public relations, and I got a job in a different place in a big corporation, and I moved there, and I did very well, except I got drinking a little too heavily. I started missing work a little bit. And they called me in and said, what are you going to do about that? And I had a great idea, because AA was new then. And I said, there's this new thing downtown called Alcoholics Anonymous, Mr. Collins. I think I'll try that. I seem to have some sort of a drinking problem. I'm sure they can help me. Would you work along with me on this 2 or 3 weeks while I go to them? He said, certainly. That's a good idea. We want to make sure you're all right. And I thought, aha. And I went to AA, their same old crap, dreary steps, and turn your life over to God. and I went there. They were nice guys, but AA is all right till they get to religion. And another thing about it was you could go home and tell your wife that you're going back to AA. I'm going back to AA, honey. Think it'll work this time. Wonderful, wonderful. What do they want you to do, sweetheart? Well, they want me to taper off. And there wasn't any Al-Anon then to screw it up for everybody. Ever since there's been the birth of Al-Anon, there's never been a moment's rest for anybody anywhere. They don't want you to taper off. They want you to stop entirely. It's a program of abstinence. We have the same steps you do. I release you, you son of a bitch. But from then on, for the next few years, I got good jobs. I'd get in trouble. I'd have 2 or 3 weeks of going to AA while I looked for a new job, and I did well. Everything was fine. I started getting I guess I was going downhill. I didn't realize thought I was keeping my own. And I finally went down in Dallas and didn't bounce up. First time ever. And they called up my wife. By that time, she was known to all my employers as Poor Charlotte. And told her I was going to be fired. She should make some plans. So she took the children and left. And they repossessed my car. And I was evicted from my house. And all of a sudden, I was standing in a street corner. And I had screwed up a lot, but God, nothing like this. And I was kind of on probation from the state hospital, so I knew I had to get out of Texas faster than throw me back in there, give me some more shock treatments. So I got a guy, he gave me a car to drive to Los Angeles. Good, I'll do that. I'll get out of here, I'll get a new job in Los Angeles, I'll make it on top. And I got as far as Phoenix, Arizona, I got drunk and lost the car. All my clothes, all my ID, haven't found it yet. And I've looked. And I got into beef that night with the guy in the street corner trying to be a cop, and he threw me in jail overnight. And in the middle of the night, I got sick and threw up in somebody's bunk, and he got so cross, he kicked my front teeth out. I got to jail in the morning, I was sick, and my clothes were torn and dirty and bloody, and I couldn't think of a person that would accept a collect phone call from me. I had burned off a lot of people. Couldn't even call my little mother, because my stepfather would not put calls through. And so I went over to the AA club one more time, and good thing about AA is no matter how bad you look, they're glad. The worse you look, the better they like it. Welcome, newcomer. Oh, look at him, what we got here. And I hustled some old lady for $20, and I took that downtown, bought a bus ticket to Los Angeles, and hustled some money up there for a guy I used to know. And all of a sudden, I found myself one morning, 2 big guys threw me out of a Skid Row mission and say, "Stay out of here, you bastard." I tried to explain to them, I'm not a bastard. 3 years ago, I was on the faculty of the University of Texas. Ads that I wrote, the LC and Elmer ads for the boarding company, were running that very week in Life and Time and Serving Post and Collier's and the New Yorker. I've had my picture in the New York Times for one of my achievements. But it's really hard to explain these things in midair. And I stood outside of that mission in the cold rain, sick, my mouth bleeding again, my clothes dirty, torn, vomit covered, unshaven, smelled bad. If someone had come up to me that morning and said, "You know, pal, you're dying. You're down to 120-some pounds. You've lost your wife and children. You'll never see them again. You've lost your career. Once upon a time, they called you a boy genius. You can't even get a job washing dishes. You've lost all your clothes, all your personal effects. You have no ID. You're never going to get any more ID because you have to have ID to get ID. So all of that car that you lost, you remember they're getting your teeth kicked out there. You can't call your mother because your stepfather's so tired of watching you play on her emotions. So she'll go down and get a few pennies, more dollars out of her little tiny bank account and send them to you, try to help her little boy. He'd rather have her think you're dead than the way you are. And you might have said, why don't you go back to Alcoholics Anonymous and admit you're an alcoholic? And if you'd have said that, if I were in the mood to be honest, I'd have to say, pal, it isn't the way it looks. I'm not an alcoholic. I wish I were. It would have solved me so many problems. But my problem is not alcohol. My problem is feeling different a lot and not fitting in, and a lot of bad breaks in my life, a lot of misunderstandings. And I don't seem to ever get much affection as much as I need. I feel good sometimes, but I don't ever drink because I'm a drinker. I don't know how I would explain it. They say you can't quit. I can quit anytime. My problem is after I quit, sometimes the next day, sometimes a few days later, sometimes. Somebody seems to sneak into my bedroom in the middle of the night and put an invisible spring in my gut. And the next day they start to tighten it. And it manifests itself. It comes out as just a little growing restlessness, just a little irritability, just a little getting tired of people giving me lectures and sermons, people who rely on my abilities to live and they give me that crap all the time, and people who just don't understand anything about me and think they know so much, got all their advice for Christ's sake. I've read books to overcome that. I went to psychoanalysis to overcome it. I got in groups to overcome it. But I'll tell you, between you and me, and you know as well as I do, the way you beat that feeling is to have 2 or 3 drinks. That's all. I don't drink because I'm a drinker. I drink because I'm a feeler. Oh, Jesus. And the problem is, sometimes I drink too much again. And they'll say, see, your problem was alcohol, wasn't it? And you have to say, yeah, I guess it was. But inside you want to shriek, no, it wasn't. My problem is not alcohol. There's something else wrong, and I don't know what the hell it is. Why don't you leave me alone? But you can't do that, so you say, yeah, I guess it was. Now, what in the world did I do stand in the street corner? I know all about AA. I know all about psychoanalysis. I know all about everything. But the other thing is, a parent, I have to get out of the rain. So I said to some goof, I said, where's the AA club? I looked bad enough to really fit in now. He said, well, it's the corner of Wilshire and Fairfax. Wilshire doesn't go down this far. You have to take this hill to Hill Street and cut over and go west on Wilshire till you get there. Okay. And I had no idea how far it was. I was walking in the rain. Some years later, I counted with my car. There's 72 long blocks. God, that's a long way to walk when you're sick and your mouth is bleeding. And I remember walking up Wilshire Boulevard, this fancy street in Los Angeles, on a Saturday, and people going by their cars and pointing and laughing at this mess walking up the street. And I got to the AA club finally. I was so tired. Same old crap, the same old steps, and same old AA, and same old, welcome, newcomer, you're home now. Oh, really? Oh, thank you very much. And I lurked around there that night. They had a meeting. I had about 4 pounds of cake because I could chew that. And they had a meeting on gratitude. I almost puked it up again. And it was still raining. Everybody went home. And I said to the manager of the club, I thought I'd better go to my newcomer act. I'm a newcomer. And I have no place to stay and it's raining. Can you help me? Says, you're in luck, kid. Guy named Joe Quinn left the 49 Merc in the parking lot last summer. It doesn't run, but it's dry. You can sleep in that. I said, you want me to sleep in an abandoned car? Is that what you're offering me? I said, yeah, good deal, huh? Yeah, I really enjoy that. Thank you very much. And I slept down a band. I still remember vaguely sleeping down a band with my mouth hurting and think, how could this be happening to me? Everybody always said I was so bright. And I hate to hate. I'm not a masochist. I hate pain. I don't like pain. What the hell's happening to me? And this went on for several days. Kept raining. If it gets stop raining, I'll go somewhere, but I can't go now. And the manager of the club said, you know, you're supposed to be a member of the club to come in the daytime. You can come to the meetings at night, but in the daytime you have to be a member of the club. But you're such a mess, you can come to the club in the daytime. But don't talk to anybody about money and just try not to be a smart aleck. Okay, thanks. 3 years ago, I wouldn't let you mow my lawn. And here I am. And I sat in these meetings in the dreary, and you know, I'll tell you what saved my bacon. I noticed in a couple of the meetings, I saw a guy that I'd seen in the movies. Oh, a movie star. Movie stars are rich. I wonder if he needs a new friend. So I began easing up to him, but he didn't have much time for me. But after a few days, people started this AA crap they always have, where there's a bunch of fanatics, you know. Got a sponsor? Better get a sponsor! So I got old Bob, the actor. And I found out later he'd only been in 3 movies, little tiny roles. But I guess I saw him in 2 of them. I've been in many more movies in the last few years than he ever was. But to me at that time, he was a movie star. He said, I want you to do what I tell you, I'll be your sponsor. Oh, sure, Bob. And he became my sponsor. They said he wasn't a very good actor, but he must have been because he was able to act well during meetings. He acted nicely. Because basically, he was not a nice man. He was a right-wing, fascist AA pig of the worst sort. Just, do this, do that. And I used to think, why am I taking this crap? I was taking that crap because he was my only way out of that situation. I thought I'd get some money from him and get a new start. I really had a plan. I talked about it before, but it's I have to laugh when I think about it. My plan was to get some money from him, get some teeth, get some clothes, go back to New York, say, yes, I did drink and I got in a lot of trouble with various jobs, but I've learned my lesson now, and I want to work and really make something of my life. And they'll say, we don't know if we think we can trust you. I'll work for nothing till you see what I can do that you can trust me. Then you pay me what you think I'm worth. And they'll do that, and I'll pile up some money. I'll come back to Los Angeles someday. I'll buy the AA club, and I'll burn it down. And I hope they're all in it having a big meeting. Not much of an ambition to stay sober, but it was pretty good. And I found out later he didn't like me. And I don't blame him, because I was the worst type of newcomer there is. I don't want to brag, but I was. And I know that because I've had a couple of newcomers like that, and they are the worst. They come into your office and say, hello. You just want to say, hello? Here's your hello, you puke, you know. I'll tell you what that kind of newcomer is. It's a person who's been around AA again and again and again, year after year. They know all about it, but they keep drinking. And they keep showing up again and say, I need help. Whatever you tell them, they say, oh, I know that. It just makes you want to kill them. But he had tried to help me. And in the next while, he taught me some great lessons. Now, I don't want to go through inch by inch, but I want to tell you new people. What I learned was this. Because what I knew is that an alcoholic is a person whose problem is alcohol. As a result of that, his life becomes unmanageable. And then I have to return to God to find sanity as though I'm insane. Then I'm going to turn my life over to God. And he was able to, over a period of time, show me and explain to me that as long as I had those beliefs, I was doomed to die drunk. They were all false. They all seem right, but they're all false, and they kill people right and left. Probably the biggest one, I could never really accept being an alcoholic because of my problem not being alcohol. And I remember him telling one time, he said, kid, don't give me that. If your problem is alcohol, you wouldn't even have to go to AA. I thought, what the hell is this now? What does that mean, Bob? He said, it means that Alcoholics Anonymous is not for people with an alcohol problem. Oh, is that right, Bob? Is it for people who have psycho-cybernetics? Is that or what? No, he said, look, kid. And he gave me a long talk on that. He said, it really boils down to this, that there's something that sounds like alcohol, and people don't understand it's much different, and so they think the problem is alcohol. And they stay around here till they can't stay around here any longer, and they leave. I said, well, what's the real problem, Bob? He said, something called alcoholism. I said, oh, Jesus, Bob. Don't play word games with me. I look terrible, but I'm smarter than hell. Alcoholism. Hooray, I'm cured, I'm cured. Shut up, he explained. But over the next, you gave me a long series of lectures on that subject, and most of it I put in one ear, not the other, as fast as I could. But the one thing he said that really stuck in my mind, he said, if your problem is alcohol, you don't have to go to AA. I guess he was referring instinctively to the first type of alcoholic. He said, you quit drinking, and you clean up your act, and you're home free. However, unfortunately, in this strange thing called alcoholism, which looks almost exactly the same to the naked eye, this mind-consuming, perception-distorting, bodily eroding thing called alcoholism, you'll discover that stopping drinking and cleaning up your act has no significant long-term effect on your life other than to gradually make it so painful you can't stand it. I said, Jesus, Bob, that's me, but I never heard it explained like that before. Well, that's the case, kid. And I said, if these guys who have all this problem with alcohol, these alcoholics, why would they drink alcohol when it hurts them when they drink it? He said, they don't drink it because it hurts them. He said, you ever hear that alcoholics are people who have an unnatural reaction to alcohol? I said, yeah, I know. They all can't stop drinking because of phenomenal craving. He said, that's podium talk, way down the road. The reason that people like you and me drink, kid, is because it does something special for us that it doesn't do for most other people. We don't know it doesn't do it for them, so we don't understand why they don't drink. But he said, when I drink, it almost instantly changes the way things look. When I have a few drinks, it almost instantly changes my relationship to the world around me. When I drink, it almost instantly makes me taller and more self-contained, and them smaller and less threatening. I've thought about that a lot. That's so true. Do you know any therapy in the world? Do you anybody in this room that could take a guy or a girl, maybe, guy especially, walking down the street, debating suicide? Will it hurt worse to jump off a building or throw myself in front of a bus? I'll just stop and get a couple drinks to get the courage. After 2 or 3 drinks, you find yourself working yourself down the bar, saying, you with anyone, Granny? You find me a therapy that does that, baby, and I'll go to it. I said, Jesus, Bob, that's me. That's why I didn't know that people, I thought everybody had that. That's right, kid. And you think about it, drinkers, that's why drinkers like to be around drinkers. I don't know where you'd go here, but where I live, late at night, 11:30 at night in a bar, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, somebody says, hey, let's go to Tijuana, Mexico. I want to be around people who say, yeah! I don't want to be around some wussy that says, why? It's so late. What'll I tell Barbara? Tell her to keep you home from now on, you asshole. Let's go! And maybe tomorrow I won't remember why I went exactly. But I want to be with people that understand life has to have a little color in it, a little zip. And when he explained this to me, I saw that for a little bit of what was happening. I said, okay, I understand why people would drink and why I drink. But now I know it's going to hurt me sooner or later. Why would people drink now? And he explained something to me that a while back, somebody gave me a tape of of a talk I gave when I was 3 years sober. They weren't taping me, they were testing their tape machine. That's what really hurts. They found it in the back of their closet here. And I listened to that tape and I heard myself talking about something that I haven't talked about in 40 years, I guess. Exactly. The way he described it. Because it wasn't in the book, but it made sense. But it wasn't really in the book, trying to find other ways to describe it. But I look back on it now, and it's absolutely correct. He said, kid, when people are born and they grow up, you go through problems. You find conflicts and situations. You got to work yourself through problems. You got to find out what's good for you, what's not good for you, and you have to learn how to act in situations. You got to learn how to get along with people. But primarily, you got to overcome these childish emotions that are pretty difficult to overcome. He says if you could do all that, that's called maturing. And when you become a mature individual, you live rather comfortably in the world. You get along with people, you take care of your responsibilities, you can handle a job, you get along with your kids, you get along with the people next door, you know what's going on, you don't do things to hurt yourself. He said, but alcoholics almost never become that mature. Said, why not, Bob? I thought he was going to say God was punishing him. He said, no, he says, because along the way, when you get in tough situations or strong problems or long-term problems, we drink and get rid of them. Why work 2 weeks to overcome some stinking problem I can take care of in 3 minutes? Here's to you, household finance. Here's to you, bitch, I never liked you anyway. Take your job and shove it. It's really great to have that going for you. But now you're in deep trouble. It's time to shape up. You're grown up now, kids maybe, and job. Okay, I've had my fun. I'm going to settle down now. I'm really going to do a job. I'm going to become a good employee. I'm going to become a good husband, a good father. I'm going to get some sleep at night. No run around. It's going to be great. And never once know that all of my ambitions are at the beck and call of a closet full of childish emotions I've never dealt with. We call them alcoholic emotions because it's a little more acceptable. Oh yes, that's my alcoholism. What are alcoholic emotions, the ones that eat you up? I hate you. You hurt my feelings. I'm going to run away. I'm getting out of here. I love you. Let's get married. Endless collection of. If you ever want to see some alcoholic emotions, stop by a school ground and watch some morning. Mine. Yeah. We learned how to conceal them, but they're sure there. And eventually they get so painful you got to have some relief. Jesus, this bunch of crap heads out here. I'll watch it this time. So then you drink till you have to get sober. Then you stay sober till you have to drink. Then you drink till you have to stay sober. And every time you go back and forth, your head says, see, it wasn't the alcohol at all. It's all these things that people don't understand. You're vulnerable and people take advantage of you. They don't understand your need for affection and love. And people don't give you a break. And it's just a series of bad breaks and misunderstandings, one after another. And that's right, that's true. You can keep doing that till you die from it. Most people do. I said, Jesus, Bob, that's the story of my life. I never heard it described. He said, there's a name for people like you. I said, what is it, Bob? He said, you're an alcoholic. I thought, I'll be damned. I've just spent 10 years, great opportunities, big jobs, doing great, and lose them all, and go to AA and laugh at them, but never once understand that I'm an alcoholic. Just a series of bad breaks and misunderstandings. I said, Jesus, Bob, what a great relief. I said, why doesn't AA describe it the way you do, instead of all this allergy, the body, the obsession of the mind, and all that crap? He says, they do, kid. I said, why'd you look at that step there, the wall, it was on the wall there. All they're asking you to do in the first step is admit your problem, that you can't control drinking, And it's not because of that that your life is unmanageable. It says you have to admit your problem is drinking. Then there's a dash, which in the English language means end of thought, beginning of new thought. And you must also admit that you're having problems with sobriety, that your life is unmanageable emotionally. And if either one of those characteristics weren't there, you would not be here. And I'd say this to you tonight and to you new people. If either of these weren't in your life, you wouldn't be here. If you could still drink, you'd be out drinking. If you could stop drinking and live comfortably, you'd be doing that. It's when you can't do either one that you're driven here and think, God, why do I have to go there? My case is different. It's going to take a while to discover your case isn't different at all. So similar. And I accepted that. That was, I guess, in January of 1959. And I really never had a severe desire to drink since then. Not because I didn't want to, but I'd been going to AA all these years. I've been listening to these, as I sat there and think, how long do I have to sit through this crap before the heat's off? But they hear these old fools talk about their slips. Oh, I had a terrible slip when I lost everything. My brother killed himself, and I think, Jesus. I thought, if I was an alcoholic, I wouldn't slip. That's bad news. And now suddenly I'm an alcoholic. And I think, Jesus, if it's this bad, I'm sober. What's it going to be like if I slip? So I gave myself permission to commit suicide. Not quite. I won't drink. Well, if it gets bad enough, I'll kill myself. And that was an out I could handle. And a couple times it almost did, but I didn't quite, because I had a sponsor that. But as I went along, I began talking to him little by little, and I felt bad. And here's the interesting phenomenon: weak people like me hate to admit they're weak. They don't want to talk about their weaknesses. They always want to take refuge behind a veneer of, I'm all right. Strong people can admit they're weak easily. I mean, I'm much stronger than I was then. I don't mind talking about weaknesses now, but then I didn't want to talk about weaknesses. I'd maybe make up them, so artificial ones. And little by little, I began to listen to what he told me. He'd give me things. And I just want to just talk a couple of minutes more, and I'll be done. Because they started on me again, as they will with you new people. Time to do the steps now. Time to do the steps. Oh, Jesus. I remember telling Bob, I cannot return to God. Ask me to return to God. I can't do that. I'd like to. I didn't know why, but I know why now because I read a lot later since then. Psychology. Like Hitler used to say, you give me their minds till they're 12 and I can make that imprint, and they'll be Nazis as long as they live, one way or another. And I believe strongly in God, and I violated that very much, and I could, a lot of times, there's no God, ha, 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 ha. But sometimes at 2 in the morning, I'd wake up and you're going to hell. That's where you're going. You're a bad, bad man, and the scale is like this. And I can't return to God. He said, well, nothing in the steps say you have to return to God. Oh, to a power greater than myself, Bob? Does that fool the other boys and girls? You and I know what they're talking about. He says, it doesn't say that either. It says, read the damn thing. It says, you came to believe in something. Can't you believe in God? And I said, no, I can't. He says, can't you believe in AA? I like parts of it. I like some of the guys, but it's too religious, Bob. I can't cope with that religious crap. Okay, he said, you think I'm doing better than you are? Of course you are. He said, congratulations, I'm your new higher power. And I could accept that. He could not send me to hell. He tried, but he couldn't. And little by little, I got to believe in him a little bit. And something began to happen as I went along and would talk to him sometimes in desperation. He insisted I go to work and I'll get fired off jobs because I had such a bad attitude and I looked terrible. Some people gave me some clothes, but they couldn't change my face and my toothlessness. I'll tell you something, in case you're new, before you go out again. People don't want to take crap from people without front teeth. It's just, they don't do it for some reason. I'll give you some crap. Shut up, you know. Something happened I thought about this many, many years later. I didn't realize at the time. I, little by little, came to believe, as things went along, that my sponsor knew how I felt. And I think, what's the big deal about that? The big deal is this: I never knew anybody that I really believed I knew how they felt. They knew how I felt. My dad didn't. My minister didn't. My bosses didn't. My doctor, my psychiatrist didn't. They all said they did. Oh, I know how you feel. But you just want to say, no, you don't, God damn it. You don't understand. Now, what's so important about having somebody that knows how you feel? Because you're not to get advice, because everybody in this room has had enough advice to last them 10,000 years. People like us just get advice all the time. Here's what I think you ought to do. Thanks for sharing. You just burn it off after a while. But if you find somebody that you believe knows how you feel, that advice becomes meaningful information from that person. And you may find yourself believing that he means what he says, and you will do. You allow him the power to tell you what to do sometimes that you wouldn't take from anybody else. I remember standing at a meeting. My sponsor, I was doing, he said, "See the woman over there? I want you to apologize to her." Why should I, Bob? I was told that you called her a bitch. She is a bitch, Bob. Why do you think she's a bitch? She told her new girls to stay away from me. Well, she's right. You apologize. Anybody else, I couldn't think of another person in the world who I wouldn't say, screw you. I'm not going to apologize to her. To hell with her, and to hell with you. But this guy had some power on me. Sorry. Bitch. I understand you're talking about quitting your job. Jesus, Bob. They got me stuffing envelopes for $1.09 an hour. I used to have an office bigger than this company. And I shouldn't be here. I should be out doing something. Well, you stay there till you get a better job. Anybody else in the world, I'd have said, you stay there. I'm not going to stay there. It's a terrible place. But it was him. Understand you missed the Thursday night meeting. Yo, Bob, you haven't been there much. I'll tell you. It's a big clique. It's just an in-group, and they all suck around each other, and they treat people like me like a piece of crap, Bob. Or maybe they know something you don't know. Go to the meeting. And this went on, and it turned out that's what makes AA work. For people like me, allowing someone to superimpose actions over your opinions and thoughts. This is truly a disease of perception. As you go along, nothing changes, but it looks different, little by little. It's really amazing. But it doesn't happen unless you allow yourself to make that surrender. The funny thing about AA, of course, is that you hear people say, I came to AA, and I threw in the towel, and it's been wonderful ever since. That's not true for anybody. I got that straight from talking to Bill Wilson. Turns out people are like me. You come to AA, and maybe eventually you throw in the towel. But as soon as the heat's off, you just snatch that baby back. Then you spend the rest of your life tearing off small strips, see if that'll satisfy you. Still go to meetings, for Christ's sake? What is this? Because human beings are human beings. No matter how wonderful you are and you work the program, you never rise above human beings, and human beings have emotions and problems and situations. That's why they say don't get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Not because they're bad things. They change your perception of things. When you get hungry, you find yourself rather impatient and a little cross. And people get a little stupid sometimes. When you're angry, sometimes gods want you to kill people for their own good. You don't really do it, but you think about it. When you're lonely, it doesn't take much to realize they're all somewhere having fun, but they didn't tell me. They don't want me When you're angry, when you're tired. When you're tired, it really gets bad because they attack you. I remember I get up in the morning sometime up out of the ocean, and I've been out been to Palm Springs the night before talking to some goofy meeting, and I'm tired, and I get on the freeway. But I know how to act like I'm not tired. Nobody knows I'm tired. I hum a little song. But they know. I can just see some little old lady up there around La Cienega saying, "See the boy in the blue Buick? He's exhausted. I'm going to cut that son of a bitch off." And the great thing about AA, however, is that once you're in the program and achieve a spiritual level, you don't have to chase people anymore past your exit. If you haven't caught them by then, and if you do catch them, you can't do anything. You want to cut them off, you can't really do that. But you can give them a ray, go next to them, go. A few years ago, I came off the Santa Monica Freeway onto the Harbor Freeway way to work, and some little girl in the car almost killed me. She cut me off. I almost went into an overpass. And I made an exception in her case. I went by my exit, 4th Street. I got her about halfway through the Santa Monica Pasadena Freeway, and I came by her car, and I gave her a quadruple ray. Then I realized she's just a little girl, about 17 years old, long yellow hair, like my granddaughter, Katie Doherty. And I thought, what kind of a guy have I become? Chasing a sweet little girl like this, probably going off to, I don't know, work or job or school or maybe to church. And I smiled. And she went. But that's what it's like out there, folks. But I just want to talk about a couple of things and I'll be done. Really, because I want to talk to the new people about that second step. Because I had some troubles with it even after he became my higher power. Now, how's this power going to make me sane? I'm not crazy! If you think I am, I'll kill you. You don't actually say that, but you feel like it sometimes. One thing you got to remember is this. Whatever your higher power is, in that step, you don't have to know how it's going to happen. All you are accepting is the fact that it can happen. You're going to accept the fact there's a power greater than yourself somewhere, your sponsor, God, AA, something, that will help you. How does it work? Never mind how it works. Just look around you. It's worked for all these people. They didn't all come here to lie to you. They're not sitting there sober to lie to you. But I want a little more explanation. At least I did. Because what does it mean, sanity? What the hell is sanity? I've done a lot of reading. You could read 10 psychiatric textbooks. You get 10 different definitions of sanity. What is sanity? Now, oddly enough, insanity is easy to define. Psychosis is easy to define. And to oversimplify it, but when the brain is under sufficient conflict, can find no resolution, in desperation to maintain its integrity, neural integrity, it will make portions of reality look different than they are, just to resolve the conflict. Now, that doesn't sound like much, but I can't imagine why people are acting like this. Oh, now I realize it. They're all trying to kill me. They're against me. Paranoia. Sounds like a terrible thing, but I know why. It's a comfort. Or some people, really bad, they move from personality to personality, schizophrenia, all sorts of. Usually, though, it's kind of just an isolated thing. If when it's total psychosis, you're put away because you can't disguise it. But many people, it's just a small amount, and when it gets triggered, something dreadful happens. These are the kind of people you read about in the paper. People say, "Oh, I lived next door to him for 10 years. He's a nice guy. I don't know. Something happened to him last night. He shot all his children and killed his wife and killed himself." Something triggered that psychosis in that guy. But here's an interesting thought. Alcoholics almost never become psychotic. Cases of alcoholics becoming psychotic are scarce as hen's teeth. You say, but they say alcoholism is the second greatest cause of insanity. And it is, but not from that. Alcoholic insanity is an entirely different thing. It's a physical thing, really. Everybody in this room, especially new people who have been drunk, realize what it's like to wake up in the morning and need something cold and wet to put the fire out. Oh, Jesus, I'm burning up. You know why that is? Because alcohol is the only substance, the only fluid I know that dries out your body. It goes through your blood and kills your blood cells all the way where the blood is connecting it. And but the cells are such that if you drink fluids and replace this, the cells come alive again. Your cells are continually dying and regenerating, dying and regenerating. There's only 2 organs in the body where the cells, when they die, do not regenerate. One is your liver, which is why people like us have a lot of problems with our liver. One is your brain. Now, it takes a long time because there's millions of cells. It takes different lengths of time for different people. But eventually, you dry out enough cells in your brain and you can't function. That is known as the Korsakoff syndrome. We call it a wet brain, ironically, but it's a dry brain. And you think, well, they're running around the media. I saw a guy with a wet brain. No, you don't. Most of you have never seen one, nor do you ever want to see one. I see them a lot. People with a dried out brain are not in meetings or doing anything. They're sitting on a ward or on a porch somewhere, and people come and feed them 3 times a day, and they change their diapers, and they put them to bed, and they get them up, and they feed them 3 times a day, and they change their diapers, and they put them to bed, and they get them up. And this goes on, because it can never get better. It's very much like Alzheimer's, except in Alzheimer's has the decency to kill the patient. In Korsakoff syndrome, you could sit like that for 50 years if you got a healthy body. Once in a while, your family comes down to see if dad or mom knows him. I don't know, you get away from me. They cry and go home. That's alcoholic insanity. That is bad stuff. But it's not psychosis. That's what alcoholics get. Why don't alcoholics get psychosis? It's an interesting thing when you think about it. Because when it gets bad enough, long enough, I can drink alcohol and change my perception of reality. I can temporarily induce psychosis. Isn't that great? Really is great. Scientists sometimes study people like us say they get to a point where they literally must drink to preserve their sanity sometimes. When it gets really bad. And I know that's true. Because I determined to stay sober. When my son died and I was in jail, and I stayed sober, and I stayed sober, and it got so bad I couldn't stand it, and I couldn't drink. And one day, I pulled my car in the garage, hooked up a hose and exhaust pipe, turned in the morning and went to sleep and died. Absolutely just flat. And the neighbor happened to be watching this, and he walked over to see why the motor was running. I didn't come out, and he pulled me out dead, and they beat my chest. They rushed me to the hospital and examined me and put me in the state insane asylum in Texas. I know how it gets when you need a drink that bad. And so, really, it would boil down to this, realistically speaking. What we're asking you to believe in the second step, that there's some power here, whether or not you totally understand it, whatever it is, whatever you can believe in, your sponsor, God, AA, the ocean, that will enable you to live without having to induce psychosis to stand it. I have to come believe there's a power here that will enable me to stay sober in the world. That means sober from alcohol and all the other things that people take to get out of it. And if you can accept that, that's a really good thing. But it's no big thing you have to do with it. It doesn't require a lot of study. These steps mean what they say. People are always giving 3-day-long interpretations of these steps. And when you're new, you don't need that. What you need is to believe they understand what they mean. That you have to admit you're having a problem drinking, you're having a problem sober. Yes, I sure as hell am. Somehow here there's a power that will restore you to staying sober. Can't believe it can happen. Don't have to worry how it's going to happen. You just have to do it. And the last thing I want to mention is that third step, because that just destroys a lot of people, destroyed me a lot of times. As it says right clearly, made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood him. And I said, God again. And at that stage of my life, I couldn't do it. So I had to change it to a higher power. And I thought about my sponsor, and I rewrote that step for myself so I could accept it. And I didn't. I look back later and thought, what a blindingly brilliant thing that was. I didn't know it. I wrote it to say, do what he says. Do what he says. Doesn't sound like much. As a result of that, my life began to change little by little. Eventually, when I was 6 months old, I was about to commit suicide one day, and he got me to write an inventory. I swore I'd never write. I've taken my inventory with a psychiatrist. Why don't I take it with an out-of-work actor, for Christ's sake? He drove me along the ocean for 40 miles, and I read this to him with a flashlight. And I thought, oh, this is, I was so upset when I wrote it, I put in things I would never tell my psychiatrist. People say, why don't you tell your psychiatrist? Because I don't want some little wussy to reject me, that's why. You did what, sir? Get out of my office. Wash off that chair first, you know. And I put stuff in that, things I had done, death, I killed somebody, terrible things. I thought he's going to say, get out of my car and walk back. He says, are you done now? I said, yes, I am. He leaned over and says, that's the best thing you've done since you got sober, kid. And I said, thought it was. And he had me make amends to started with my father, a man I hadn't talked to in 10 years because I felt he deserted my mother and I, all sorts of crap. He took actions little by little. When I was making those amends, as he pointed out to me, as you will learn someday, not now, someday, new people, when you get to that point, after your inventory and all these things, you start making amends, that's where the promises start to come true. You start to have some strength and some ability in yourself. And little by little, my life changed. And then when my sponsor died, by that time, I had come to believe in AA as my higher power, and I always did. Then I got another sponsor who was a very spiritual man, not religious, but spiritual man named Chuck Chamberlain. And he showed me I could pray without having to think that God's going to come and get me. He pointed out to me I wasn't that important enough for God to hate. And I came to believe in God, and I came to believe that God's grace is available to everybody, not just me. If he loves me, he loves you. If he doesn't love me, he doesn't love you. If God were a person to say, or a force to say things like, you two can stay sober, you can't have God's grace. You two can, you four can't. I would never make it. It had to fall like the mercy of God, or the rain has to fall like God. And why do some people die from alcoholism? Because they will not take the actions that somehow occasionally pull open their damn heads and let some of that grace in. Because as far as I'm concerned, grace just means enabling people to have some degree of peace of mind and understanding of life. But as a result of that, I stayed sober. And I eventually became, when I was 5 years sober, I was working started as a writer in that medical corporation. When I was 5 years sober, I was director of advertising for that medical corporation. Didn't have any front teeth at first. I had to go to work looking like this. But I had front teeth then. I smiled a lot. In case there's anybody here who's lost some teeth, let me tell you this. Once you become spiritually pure, they grow back. And I worked in radio and television. I worked in big companies, and I became quite successful. My wife and children heard the crinkle of green in my wallet all the way to Dallas, rushed to my side. 9 months and 10 seconds later, another Catholic hit the street. Somebody gave me a book on the rhythm system, which stopped all that. My kids are all grown up now, and 3 of my daughters turned 16 this year in Alcoholics Anonymous. My oldest daughter is, she's broken our hearts because she's become a judge. We had so hoped for a defense attorney, but no. She comes home at Christmas, she says, Daddy, remember when we were little girls, you used to send us to our room? I said, sure, honey. She says, when you come to Albuquerque, New Mexico, I'm going to send you to a little room. I have no need to go there. But then when I was 15 years sober, and AA had changed my thinking significantly, enough so that one day I found myself resigning a job in Beverly Hills, and for the last 31 years, I've been the managing director of the Skid Row mission that threw me out in 1958. And people say, why do you do that? Give up this big money career to run that damn mission. And I can't think of a good answer. I think, well, For such a significant decrease in salary, I thought it must be spiritual. Well, I'm still looking for those two bastards. Once I find them, I'll be out of the year. But it's amazing. I go down there every morning. I don't get paid to do 12-step work. It isn't 12-step work at all. It's way below that. I work with a lot of alcoholics, but not there. There we try to keep them alive. And I go home at night, and I always feel more like a man than I ever did all those days. I was going down the elevators in my shiny suit, popping my fingers. Now, if some of you new people think the answer is to run your own mission, forget it. There's only so many to go around. I got mine, and the purpose of Alcoholics Anonymous, it turns out, is as not to make you drier and drier. I'd burst in a flame up here. But as Steve said today, I think AA is the same in England tonight as it was in Akron, Ohio, June 10th, 1935. One alcoholic talking to another alcoholic to help him reduce his feelings of difference at least enough so that he will begin to take actions he does not yet believe in. And that, to me, is the genesis of sobriety. And the only other thing I'm going to say is you got to remember, you have to keep doing it. A lot of great people have died from drinking after being sober in AA because they somehow felt, once I feel good again, I'm all right. This is not like pneumonia where you get well and you're okay for people like us. This is like diabetes. And you'll be well as long as you keep taking your insulin. You know, some of the people who wrote the stories in the first copy of the big book drank again. Some of the people who wrote the stories in the second printing, drank again. They weren't bad people. They didn't yet realize they had to keep doing it. And you have to, no big fanaticism. You have to go to meetings every night for the next 100 years or anything like that. It's something that I've always thought, that the answer is really, in 1950, they had the first international convention. They got Dr. Bob to talk, and he was dying of cancer. And he had such a zeal for AA, but they didn't think he wanted to talk because he was dying. He said, oh, no, I've got to talk. Next to Bill, I've got 15 years sobriety. No one else may ever have this amount. So on that day, his son on one side, somebody else on the other side to him, the podium, and he gave a short talk, and many of us have heard it or read it. He started off kind of nothing much to it. He said, I want to welcome you all to Akron and hope that go back and tell the boys and girls in your group that we know that we get out of A what we put into it. And he said to something to the effect of, as I look over this vast crowd, I'm glad that some small thing I did 15 years ago maybe helped bring this about. He said, I want to apologize for my health. I've been in bed most of the last few months. And just kind of, home. But then he said, I would like to call your attention to 2 or 3 things. And then he gave in about 2 minutes what many people consider to be the Gettysburg Address of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it rings as true tonight in Bristol as it did any time ever, and it has ever since. And he said, it's kind of like a deathbed confession. It wasn't a confession because he wasn't confessing, an admonition perhaps. He said, I'm going to call your attention to 2 or 3 things. First, let us remember to keep our programs simple. Let's not louse it all up with Freudian complexes, which may be of interest to the scientific mind, but has nothing to do with our work here. Our work here, when reduced to the last, consists of love and service. And we all know what love is, and we all know what service is. And secondly, he said, let us remember, let us guard that erring member, the tongue, and try to use it with kindness and understanding. And there isn't a person in this room or any room like it in the world who doesn't know exactly what it means. We're all fine people when things are going our way and things are working out. But let somebody hurt our feelings, or we hear somebody said something bad about us, and that tongue just terrible. And finally he said, none of us would be here tonight, this afternoon actually it was, none of us would be here this afternoon if someone hadn't taken the time to take us to a few meetings, to explain things to us, to give us a pat on the back when we needed. Let us never reach that stage of smug complacency where we are too busy to help our friends who are still suffering. He said, thank you. And he sat down and died shortly thereafter. And if I would say to you new people, we could talk to you about the steps. I've tried to help you a little bit, I hope, the first 3 steps, so it doesn't eat you up like it ate me up. But just remember, this is a simple program. It's love and service, trying to help people once in a while, taking care of yourself, living with some degree of dignity, and try to watch what you say so you don't turn into one of these vicious bastards who just destroy meetings. And never get that stage of smug complacency where you're too busy to extend a hand to somebody behind you. And when that day comes, you'll be feeling pretty damn good. Thank you.